everyone. This is the Flow State podcast. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Lotty Wiltshaw. Lottie, hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I enjoyed that hold music. That's pretty
Oh,
funky.
thanks very much. That was
Yeah.
of my own creation, that one as well.
Is
Just,
it?
just when I was supposed to be doing probably something more important, but did that instead. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's good warm up. Good warm up.
I feel like hold music is like we need more of it. It's like it's disappeared a little bit.
Do you know what? It's funny you say that because I was having a conversation with somebody about the classic hold music tunes of I think it was like mid to late 90s and then into 2000 to 2010. And then I found a load of videos on, it was either YouTube or Instagram of people who'd recreated some of them with like an 8-bit synth, which I enjoyed way too much, to be honest. It was like amazing just reliving the horrible memories of being on the phone for them. But yeah, there's not really much going on now, is there?
We haven't really got any. There's no elevator. No, but no one's on the phone anymore, are they? Really?
I know.
It's all video. It's all video calls and.
Where would you put them? Where would you put them? Just in a chat bot, I guess. The chat box. Maybe that's where they could come back when you.
I don't know.
You're trying to talk to a human and you just incessantly saying talk to a human and just insert a little chat bot. Hold video. It'd be quite cool.
Yeah, maybe.
There you go. I do miss it a little bit as well.
Could be a new business avenue there, Stu.
I hold that thought. Nobody steal that idea. I'm putting that in the box. Putting that in the box for later.
Quick. Get it copyrighted.
So, other than coming up with, hold music-based business ideas, Lottie, as it's your first time on the show, give me a bit of an intro to, well, not me, because I sort of already know what you do, but introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you doing? What is Shot Blast Media all about? Tell me all the critical facts.
So yeah, Shot Blast, well, we're a content creation company based in Leeds in the UK. And
possibly the greatest city in the world, surely.
Leeds.
Some might say.
Love Leeds. It's a great city. But yeah, we're a small team, really, sort of small and niche. So a lot of our work is primarily targeted around the industrial sector. So most of our clients are sort of industrial manufacturing, engineering type companies, and we produce content for them. So obviously content for things like brand and awareness, but obviously the other side of it is content for more internal communication. So all the typical health and safety type stuff, but the interesting health and safety type stuff. So not the boring stuff that switches you off, the more creative stuff. So
I like it.
Yeah, it's been a blast, really. We've just celebrated our 13th birthday. So
I saw that. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, we're in our teen era now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next. Really, I was sort of saying to someone the other day, I was like, I feel like when you start your business, you have those sort of early volatile years when you're starting and it's like a baby, coming into the world, and then you find your feet and you groove a little bit, don't you? And then ultimately now I hit the teens, it's like when you're trying to grow and scale up and get to the next stage, I feel like we're going to have more of that volatile state again. So I see quite a lot of challenges coming up, but it keeps it real, keeps it interesting.
How are you feeling about it? Given that like the 10-year mark, I hear is a big one as well. When you sort of break through that, the decade, are you feeling good about your awkward teenage years as they're coming up?
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of really set a plan for some serious growth, I'd say, over the next several years. So we've increased the team, we've put in more resource, we've upscaled of all of our kit. We're leaning into a lot of AI. We're looking at a lot of new tech. We're sort of exploring different technologies. So I think, I'm excited. I think there's a lot for us to learn, and I think there's going to be quite a lot coming into our space that's going to shake things up a little bit. We're going to get some dystopia going on, so it's how you navigate that. But I think obviously once you've been in business 13 years, you have a good reputation, you've got a good client base. So ultimately I think that should sort of set your stall out for the future and see what it brings. So I'm optimistic.
No, I'm glad to hear that, because I'm obviously you mentioned a few things I'm keen to dig into, like around the whole creative world, but I think it's nice to hear that you're feeling positive about it, because I've been a bit doom and gloomish about the whole, sort of encroachment of AI tools onto the world of the creative arts. And like, I think you guys are in an interesting space where you're blending together, working with companies that make like very hardcore, like real stuff in the manufacturing industry, right? Which is like irreplaceable physical things that you can't just be like, oh, computer can do that. But then obviously you guys are, you're communicating what is happening in a very much more intangible digital form that's just like under attack from a lot of different sides. So I think first and foremost, like, how are you, what is your current take on like AI tools and the way that they're being used in your world at the minute? Because I know you're mainly video, right? But you're still doing a fair bit of like photography as well, or are you where are you guys at, and how are you using it? Where are you seeing it sort of being helpful or possibly being not helpful at the moment?
Well, it's all video content creation. So there's photography that we generally, if we're out to sites, we'll plug that in and bring in a third party generally to deliver that. I think they're definitely two different art forms of those. You get content creators and photographers, and they are, whilst you might have some of the same kit, they are, in their true creative sense, they are separate disciplines. I think with AI, it's an interesting area. I think that there is a lot of concern within the industry and within the creative industries about where it's going. But I think that's across the board in general. Everyone's like, AI is going to take our jobs. And, maybe long term it will do. If you think about the point of, this whole concept, isn't there, of singularity, and once AI reaches, surpasses human levels of IQ, where's the trajectory? Where does stuff go? I think in terms of creative, so much of life and what it means to be a human being is connection, right? So it's connection with people, it's connection with your audience. So at the heart of all content, really, if you're looking at things fundamentally around building trust, it's connection. So AI is a great tool. I think there's huge benefits of using it. We use it a lot, and we're leaning into it very, very heavily because it's coming full force. So you have to fully embrace it. But I think if you're confident in your understanding of content, in the sense that it's nuanced and it is storytelling and it is about human connection, AI can't replicate that. It's derivative, right? So it learns from what it knows. So, true creativity, true authenticity, true human, feeling, that's always going to sort of play a part, I think. And that's the human job, is to facilitate that. AI is a great bolt-on for like speeding up your workflows, putting in automations. It can do a lot of the grunt work. And as time ticks on, I'd like us to see how we can build AI agents, particularly in post-production, to, do some of the grunt work instructed by us, the humans, to sort of be able to speed up and add a lot more kind of value really to our client base. And then we come in and finesse. We do all the, the nuanced stuff, all the creativity, all the, we know what it's like to be human, right? Because we are human. So how is AI? Yes, it could learn that in theory, but, if you're talking about, we get to this dystopia where you've got robots walking around and you've got people, whilst there will be people that go for the robots, people are still going to want people, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. I'm with you there. I think like there's been a few amusing examples of exactly what you're talking about over the past few conversations. Like someone was saying, like, we might get the Wall-E version of the future, right, where everyone just turns into a weird human blimp because you forget, like, it's like the sort of Disney version of the Matrix, I guess. And I was like, maybe that was pretty. I mean, it kind of became great, I guess. It's a bit of a happy sad film. But then someone else was just like, obviously the classic Terminator Matrix view, which is pretty depressing and fairly terrible. And then I was reading, like, I think I sent you a bit of this before we jumped on, like, the current view of big tech in the US, which is like funny and also a bit tragic in that I didn't realize, but like, the reason that US technology companies are trying to hoover in all of creative work from forever is because they're scared of China and they're scared that they're going to fall behind, which I was quite surprised about, where you're like, great, so you want to continue to just steal everyone's creative work because you think you'll make less money, seems to be the general view there. But it's reassuring to hear that you're still, I like the faith in just kind of, look, we can still use these tools to continue to be more human instead of like just becoming slaves to like weird robot workflow and artificially generated garbage, basically, which seems to be
we're going to get a lot of it
at an alarming rate, right?
Yeah, it's going to flood. It is going to absolutely flood the market, AI created content, but so much so that I think people will get turned off to it because it's not real. So whilst it can fulfill a lot of things, and that's why I very much see it as sort of a hybrid way of working. I think there'll be space for both, for sure. But where you really need to kind of build more brand loyalty and trust and credibility, you want to see people, you want to see stuff happening on sites, you want to see products, you want to see real things. And actually, I think there might be more of a shift back to the long form content, because one of the things that I was listening to on a recent podcast, they were talking about that it was a Stephen Bartlett one, actually, and he talked about when he presented on stage a lot of the time, it was the streamers that got the biggest claps, the biggest, attention when someone entered the stage. And a lot of the time they're streaming for 5, 6, 7 hours, like a full day. And people are obviously spending their time with these people. And again, it proves the connection point, right? So it isn't the really quick chopped form, quick cut edits. It's like the long, deeper, meaningful connection stuff. So I feel as long as there's humans on the planet, humans are going to want connection, because that's what we live for, is connection. At the heart of what we live for, it is connection with each other. That's it. Yeah. So,
and look, I mean, I totally agree. I think, and if you're not doing that, like, what what are you even doing, right? Like, it seems kind of futile to be, just plugged into the internet 24/7 if it's not to actually interact with each other, right? And like, I think without getting too distracted on a rant about the current state of the internet, you just touched on something that I did want to ask you about, which is longer form content and building that, like you were saying, just sort of building that relationship and sort of the establishing trust with people and, explaining the nuts and bolts of what you're doing. I have quite a lot of, I don't want to say trouble, but it's often, I'll say challenging with a lot of the people that we've been working with over the past couple of years to get people to be bought into that like bigger narrative around things, which is, I find a bit of a shame, because we work with a lot of like quite complex software businesses, which is, there's parallels with like manufacturing in that a lot of them are very complicated to sell in, like they're sort of very like involved behind the scenes infrastructure type products. So you need to kind of know a lot about how they work and what you want to do with them, and there's a long process to bring them into an environment and an infrastructure, which seems ripe for me to do, the kind of thing that I would imagine you guys would be doing, right? Where if you go to a manufacturing client and they want to tell the story of some weird thing that you don't even know exists but supports like half of human life, like when you think about plumbing, you're like, nobody apart from plumbers, nobody thinks about plumbing much unless it breaks, right? But without plumbing, we would just not have showers or baths or hot water or taps or whatever, right? So a lot of work goes into maintaining that. But you and you'd be like, well, water comes out of a thing. I don't need to consider that any further, right? So I did have a question at the start of this. The question I was going to ask you was, when you're approaching this with with your clients and how you guys look at this, like, how do you approach sort of helping people to, build those narratives around what they're doing around a potentially quite boring, product or application of something, to say, look, like, where is the interesting human part of that? Because that's kind of what we are often struggling with like the flow state clients as well, is like they're often software, right? Like only certain people get excited about it. So we're like, right, but what's the human side of this? Where's the benefit for me? Like, as a possible, very much removed end user, like, how do you guys like approach that? I guess
it's a good question. I think it's all back to storytelling, isn't it? If you want to get people bought into something, you've got to tell stories. Is trying to tell more stories around products and services, and understanding, I guess, how the information is, what type of information you want to get out there, and ultimately then what format is it best going to be suited to. I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of the rise recently of podcasts, so this is all, again, it's going back to that long form content, isn't it? It's the thought leadership, it's the opinions, it's the full narrative around the piece. But again, so much of it is people are kind of not necessarily just talking about their products and services, they're just talking with more open interest, and then telling stories. So that's ultimately then how you build connection, which back with your audience, and thus a community around your business. Because ultimately, I think that's where the value for businesses is going to be, longer term with brand. It is looking at, the community side. There's one thing that's sort of trying to get the reach, the impressions, the attention, following the trends, doing the quick cut stuff to kind of hook and grab people. And I think there's a need for that in businesses as well. But again, it depends what your positioning, what your aim is, what your ultimate objective is. It's like, I mean, I spent time last night. I went out for dinner with a client. Now, this client, he told me that we've known each other for 9 years, and this is the first time I've met him in person.
Oh, really?
Physically.
Brilliant.
Physically in person. We've worked on
cool.
numerous projects together, and we had dinner, and we had 2.5 hours time sitting down, and we talked about so many things, a lot of things that that we just wouldn't have talked about if we were in a different setting, different location, in an office, on a call. And again, it's all linking back down to that connection side, and that's it's just spending time with someone, isn't it? So if there's ways of trying to look at how you can authentically do that through your content and capture some of that and capture people's imagination by, telling stories and bringing them on a journey, then ultimately they're more likely to go, what, that company's got a bit of something about them. They've got something that I like. I don't know what it is. It's just a gut feeling. They might be able to help me with X, Y, and Z. So that's kind of a long-winded way of answering your question, but I don't think there's one
it's quite a long
right
question,
or there's no right or wrong answer. I think it's just looking at what works and what typically feels right.
Yes, and I think something in relation to that as well that I think is a current challenge, which I'm keen to hear what you think about as well, is like and it's a live conversation for us at the moment, because obviously, running the podcast is great because I like to talk and I like to talk to other people who like to talk, so it works perfectly. But we're going through this at the moment where, we need to sort of start doing more of haven't really done a lot of the, shorter cut stuff, or really played the algorithm game in many social networks for a while. Mainly because it couldn't really be asked and didn't have to. But now, we're in a similar position to you where sort of looking to scale the business a little bit. You sort of have to start doing it. I don't just want to throw loads of money down the digital advertising toilet, because I don't think, at our stage it's particularly useful. So the challenge we've got, which I know we spoke about briefly before as well, is it feels a bit distasteful to me personally to have to then be like, YouTube, we know that shorts work really well. So now we have to be like, from this conversation, how do we create a few, sort of provocatively titled short videos that we can fire out so we can take advantage of where YouTube are focused, which is pushing short form video because it's, what generates some money. Or, with LinkedIn, we spend a lot of time on there. So how do we do more corporate-y, boring stuff, which is basically like Facebook from the 2010s now. So how do we spin it for that? I find it quite hard reconciling our own sort of brand position and how we want to represent our business and team with those formats where you have to be like, look, if we're going to do this organically, which is where we focus, you have to sort of play the game a bit in those environments. And unfortunately, there's no real way around that unless we want to just spend a ton of money, like pushing our messages to people, which we don't want to do. So I guess my questions to you, Lottie, are: do you think do you have the same feelings about it? Do you think is that just sort of a bit of self so what I'm looking for here, is that just like you just got to hold your nose and do it, or is it an actual issue and it should be something you should be concerned about? As a team who do a lot of brand building stories yourselves, like, is that something you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, we've really upped the game on that side, I would say, more recently, because obviously we're in a fortunate position, right? As content creators, we have a lot of content. We have all our clients' content. We have content that we can create ourselves. So we're surrounded by it. And I think recently we've had to sort of make a decision about what's, going to work best for us. And ultimately, I think so much of it is experimentation. I think people get too bogged down in making sure they've got everything and making sure it's right before they get started. And this stuff takes so long, particularly organic stuff. It takes so long to build. So you've just got to get started. And I think the more, again, it's back to the authenticity part, the more authentic and raw and real it can feel, the better, really. I mean, there's obviously place for polish, which is important, but when you're talking about socials, I think you've just got to I mean, I try and release brand, like personal brand content, because I've just started my own channels and try and do that every week. And it's literally, I'll have some talking topics and I'll just say what I think. And it isn't rehearsed. It's not pre-planned. It's just my opinion on it. If people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. But it's unique to me because it's me and my thoughts. And I think that's what's important for businesses as well is, yes, okay, you've got to have some understanding of, what will work on TikTok versus what will work on LinkedIn is different from how it's maybe cut, edited, packaged up. So yes, there's a sort of, let's say, a template you've got to work to that's going to help you if you want to push it organically. What you're actually saying and doing, I think you've got to find your own vibe, really. There's no point trying to go, oh, well, that worked for that company over there, so we're gonna do that one thing and kind of chase the trends.
Guys, let's just take that. We'll take all of that. Really,
because no one knows. No one can sit here and go, oh yeah, I'm going to make the next trend piece. No one knows. They organically come out of nowhere because someone has thought, this is funny, or what, it's a moment or whatever. It's captured something that's unique, and then it's obviously then gone viral. And you can't really recreate that. You've just got to be real to yourself. And yes, understand how can you position content so you're not making content and not putting it in front of the right audience. That's important, because otherwise it's not going to work, right? So you need to understand where your audience is. But the more you put out there and just get going with it, the more the audience really is going to tell you what content it wants to see, because you'll find from the data and the stats, and that's what you have to check is look at the impressions, look at the likes, look at the comments, look at what's the information that's coming back, and then you can start to find out what kind of things work. Like for us, we know a lot of our behind the scenes content works really well. People want to see production, they want to see real people with cameras on site. We're not plugging what we do, we're just showing people what we're doing, and that's of interest to people. Like that stuff always tends to outperform other things that we've done, so it is the more raw, gritty, this has been set up over here, or that's not quite worked out over there. We've given an opinion on this over here, because it's just life. It's just unfolding day-to-day stuff. And that's what people tend to like for us, but everyone's different. So you've got to put lots of bits out there, look at the data, look at what it's saying, understand the nuance between the platforms, but ultimately be real in your approach, be authentic to yourself.
I think that's you touched on a number of pieces of advice that I think are really sound there as well, that I've been given and have heard over the years, which are really interesting. So if I'm recapping you correctly as well, like, it's just getting started. Number one is like the key thing, right? Like, I think even winding way back to my SEO days of like, you just got to do stuff and then see if it works or not. Like, I've spoken to so many people who just can't get over that like first hurdle of, I might look a bit stupid or say something and someone might disagree. And like, I know we're in a very highly how would you describe it, like volatile environment at the moment online, with online discourse, but like you said, I think if you have an opinion and you can stand by it, like, people may well disagree. It's fine. You're not hopefully going to be killed over it. Like, you might get shouted down from idiots who just spend all their time on the internet, but like, who cares? Like,
well, there's trolls everywhere, aren't there? That's life,
Exactly, yeah. And like, you would hope most people would be reasonable enough to disagree with some useful commentary and not just something stupid. But I think that's a really interesting one. And to your point, like, I think people seem very afraid to just test stuff as well. Like, I know can be a bit scary when it's got your own face or possibly brand attached, but I've just found, like, you've got to not be afraid of looking like an idiot every now and then to get anywhere. Because if you are too scared of a bit of embarrassment, you're only ever going to sort of achieve whatever you've achieved and stay in whatever state you're in, right? Like, there's no way to really progress anywhere without doing something stupid every so often, which you may well diagree with, but I think
no, it's
got where I am by doing several stupid things so far. Like,
you have to. Yeah, and you just got to start somewhere. I went to a conference, it was back in April, and it was this woman was talking about how she built so she had a massive social following, and the content she was putting out was amazing, but she showed everyone in the conference the first video that she put out, and it was super basic, pretty cringy, and she played it, and it's sort of like, you look at that and you see here, this is like 8 years down the line of consistency and building on her own platform, and it's just a lot of hard work. And obviously online you get a lot of the polished, finished article when you see a lot of established sites and channels and platforms, and and I think that is what puts people off, because they go, well, I can't be anything, I'm never going to be that. But they might be, but it's understanding it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It's like if you go into the gym, right? You start training, it's 2, 3, 4 years down the line until maybe you've changed your entire physique. It takes a lot of effort and hard work over and over and over again. So the key thing it is, and you hear it all the time, it is just getting started. And Stephen Bartlett, his quote, to quote him, he said, embarrassment is the cost of entry. And it's so true. It is true. That is the cost. But if you can get around that and just think, well, you've got to work on your own agenda, then go for it. What have you got to lose?
Well, that's it, right? And like, Stephen Bartlett's an interesting one, actually, because I remember like first listening to his before anyone even heard of Social Chain, and he's a great example where he, on his early podcasts, I remember him saying, don't direct quote me on this, that he used to record them like with his phone like under a duvet in a cupboard or something, like when he first started.
Probably,
he was like, super basic, just recording a little, sort of, a diary, which is what it was. And I remember one of his early ones, he was saying like he was walking down the street, like, just filming, I think himself or something, or recording something, and was like, people were, looking over and being like, what the fuck is this guy doing? But he was like, like you say, you've just got to do stuff that other people are either afraid to do or haven't thought of doing. And he's look at what he's grown from just following his. I mean, obviously he's intelligent enough to know what he's doing, right? And like grew Social Chain, but yeah, like that basic starting point. Everyone's essentially got a multimedia mini studio in their pocket now. Like it's not like there's any shortage of the tools. Like if you've got a smartphone, it's got a pretty decent set of cameras and an all right microphone, and like it's not hard to find a quiet room, is it? So yeah, I think so many of the barriers to entry have been removed. Like as you would well know, being in film and video production, like that go back 10-20 years, it used to be mad expensive to even consider getting into film, right? Whereas now you're like, just pull your phone out of your pocket, great, do one of those crap shaky hand videos that are on the news all the time, people who don't seem to be able to like point anything in one direction, but like it's all there. It's all there now.
It's true. It is.
Sorry, that was a bit of a tangential rant there about the poor quality of casual observers of events, but yeah, I think coming back to what you were saying there, Lottie, like I think just about getting started and getting moving, like how do you find coming back to that, founder-led content, putting your own face in front of the camera point, do you find that you guys are doing more of the your standard more corporate approach to filming, where it's more just, as you were saying before, showcasing the people, the processes, products, whatever people are doing? Or are you doing some more of that more personal, people-driven stuff? Is there a bit of a mix? Like, how are you, what's all that look like for you guys at the moment?
It's a blend. So the personal branding stuff for me, I think we only set up 2 months ago. So my personal brand channels are really, really very much in their infancy. So we're still looking at kind of what's working on those. But again, we've had really good feedback so far, good traction. There's a couple of contacts and potential projects I think that have come out of that just in the last sort of 8 weeks, of people that I've met from a while ago that have seen more of that stuff and then reconnected. So in essence, it's early conversion. It's showing that it's working. I think with the brand stuff, a lot of that's being delivered by the team. So we have a lot of the team involved in terms of, presenting different bits of information. There's behind the scenes stuff. We talk about jobs that we've done. We celebrate successes. We look at milestones, capturing office, daily site life. It's a little bit of a blend. Yeah, it's a blend of different things. But again, I think, we know as well, and again, you can look at the stats of past businesses where there is founder or director-led brand content alongside a brand, it personalizes the brand, right? So that loops all the way back round to connection, because people are going to connect with a person, with a feeling, versus, obviously people connect with a brand, but, to establish a brand, it's so much about, a movement and community and being associated to that. And that takes time, and it depends what kind of industries you're in as to how much of that you're truly able to build, like Apple, totally. Classic, but again, Steve Jobs, he was so alongside it. So it's, Virgin, we've just seen it over and over again, where if the founders are very, very present, I think it gives the brand a lot more meaning. It humanizes it. And I think that's important. So yeah, it's something really that I know I've needed to do for a while, and I've put off because embarrassment is a cost of entry. You're just like, no. Do I have to? But, again, if we're advising clients, right? So, this is about me practicing what we preach. It's like, okay, well, I can't talk to a client about, let's set you up with a channel and we could do some of your content like this if I'm not doing it, if I haven't got anything to show for myself. So I think it's important because obviously that builds, more social proof in terms of what you're doing. And obviously then you've got the potential to say, well, actually this already in 8 weeks has generated this amount of business for us. It's converted this. So we know it works, even in a really small following so far, it's having a positive impact. So we just got to kind of keep building on it, really.
Yeah, that's really awesome to hear, because I think we're in exactly the same space with doing the podcast, and like this kind of format I think is exactly the same as you guys. Like we try and do what we do, apart from the content stuff, we do everything that we sell and sell all the stuff that we do, but most of that's like behind the scenesy, you know, managing people's social profiles and running stuff that's a pain in the ass to run, you know, like, but yeah, this kind of format, one of the first reasons that I started doing this was to kind of, I'm still chipping away at all of our clients for this, but just to be like, look, if you are a bit nervous, you know, come into our forum, which is not hopefully a scary place to come and talk about stuff, and just have a bit of a, you know, it's like the sandpit test drive area where you can come on, you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. It's not aligned with your own brand, you know, we can just control that stuff. So it's, I think it just gives you, like you were saying, way more options to sort of help to demonstrate how you can do things differently. Also, obviously, the, you know, the value of like this way of working for respectively, you know, your business and ours. And it's just a hopefully fun way to dig into what people are, you know, are up to and thinking, right? But yeah, I think the point you made though is, as you noted earlier, when you're doing it organically, there is a bit more test and learn and trying to find that mix of the right people, the right environments, getting in front of the right audiences does take a bit of time. So I think, you know, just not rushing and expecting things to happen like immediately is pretty important. You've got to kind of keep the faith for quite a while and just be like, look, as you guys were saying, like we haven't had a lot of our own content because we didn't really bother creating it before starting to do this, which was that we had the opposite challenge to Shop Blast, where we're like, well, what, you know, how do we start creating stuff? Like I don't really just want to start talking nonsense about like how we've just designed the UI for an app that we've like built or whatever, because no one's interested. So like we just need to, we've been quite careful about how we've started to put it together basically to make it more broadly appealing but still specific enough, which is quite a challenge. But you know, that's all the stuff that nobody would know about because there was months and months of planning and researching before we started. So yeah, I don't really have a point there, but it's just interesting.
Well,
we're on the same
tell
journey,
the story. Tell the story, because that's what makes it relatable. So you have just leaned into a few bits that would hook together as a nice piece, where you would find an audience that would be interested in that because they're looking to embark on a similar journey, maybe. So
I hope so. It's just, you know, as you were saying earlier, like the constant journey to try and find your people, you know, on the internet in various different places. I have to say, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, which is on a bit of a tangent, is you obviously are working in a much more real life customer facing kind of environment than we do, broadly speaking, at the moment. How have you found, what is the general situation in the UK like at the moment? What's business like? Is it picking up a bit in the manufacturing industry? Is it still in a downturn? You know, how are things over there?
I think we're in a recession, coming into a recession, potentially
always,
a big one.
Always fun. Great.
Yeah. So I get the sense. I mean, we do a lot of work with construction, and it always starts there, really. And from having had recent chats with some of my contacts that are in around the industry, that work in the industry, you know, a lot of people that they know are saying, you know, 30-40% down on last year. I think we've obviously had a changing of government. So without getting political, because I don't really talk politics, that has
probably
had
a safe option, to be fair, a
tremendous impact in some ways for that. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how the next sort of 12 months goes for businesses and where their priorities are going to be. I mean, I wouldn't say we necessarily work ultimately with recession-proof industries. However, we work a lot with manufacturing, engineering. You know, we have a lot of clients in the power sector, utilities. You know, some of those are pretty safe. You know, they just sort of they keep creating power, right? Because we need power, whatever's gonna happen. So, you know, there's maybe a slight advantage there. But I think in any shift, you know, I try to not get down to this sort of recession thing. I think you know, you have ups and downs within business, and there's business to be found everywhere. It's just, you know, when things are good, people are throwing work at you and throwing contracts at you and throwing things your way. And when there's a bit of a shift, which we're seeing now, actually, you know, you've got to dig a bit deeper. You've got to try a bit harder. You've got to put more effort into that pitch or that proposal, or, you know, go the extra mile. And I think, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a good thing, because actually it reminds you to be hungry, right? And you still got to, as a business owner, I think if you if you lose that fighting, stay hungry feeling, and you're in a position where you coast, you're not really caring as much about what you're doing. So I actually think there's opportunity where you have maybe a change in the wind, because it makes you approach things differently. It makes you take a little step back. You do a bit of a review. All of those things you can fundamentally use to your advantage. And for every no, there's a yes around the corner with the right type of company. It's just got to align at the right time. So, and they could be businesses that you work with for years and years and years. So, yeah, I think the state of the economy at the moment here in the UK, I don't think it's particularly great. And I think we're going to see it get worse over the next 12 months or so. And we'll see how that plays out. But, I feel like it's somewhat the same for a lot of places at the moment. I just think we're going to get a real big shift coming. Yeah. There's a lot going on. It's a little bit scary, but, it's so much of it is, it's out of our control. So it's what you can do to control your own portion of it, really, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is very much my perspective as well. Like, I think we...
What's it like over there? Do you feeling the same vibes, or...?
Yeah, it's not been... I mean, things have... They're a little bit slower just in virtue of the market compared to the UK and Europe down here anyway. But we work with businesses who typically are like US or European owned, and then we're working with offices like either in Singapore or across like Australia and New Zealand. So we do get a bit of a global view of what everyone's kind of saying and doing. And there was definitely a slowdown at the end. It would have been last year when across like the big software businesses, they were just like firing tons of people, which happened again this year, and I believe is continuing into the end of this year as well. So it's weird, because it's not to say that they stop go-to-market activities, which is where we fit in, but they obviously, everything does shuffle around, and obviously if they're firing a ton of people from their marketing or sales teams, that does affect potentially projects that we're working on. So it was less of a, the economy's all right. There is a weird... in Australia in particular, like huge bubble in the property industry that just keeps going. People have been saying it's going to like burst for since I arrived, like whatever, 12 or 13 years ago, still hasn't. And the economy in Australia is interesting because it's very concentrated around 2 or 3 pretty old school industries. It's like property, mining, and then some financial services, and not a right lot else. And like a lot of all the raw materials and stuff all just get exported off. Not a huge technology industry here. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one really, but it's not, I wouldn't say it was particularly bad, but it is quite sluggish. Like there's not a huge amount of growth projected, I don't think, for the rest of the year. Obviously all the, sort of general global turbulence affects us to a degree. We're sort of insulated from some of it and not from some of the rest. Like same as with the UK, right? Like there's stuff that happens in America that affects everyone. And the ongoing war between, Cold War between the US and China, and like the tension around the Pacific Rim countries is all sort of bubbling away. So yeah, it's not like doom and gloom, but there is all the usual rumblings of like, these guys are trying to do something to these guys, and we don't know what that means, and someone's tariffing someone and whatever. So yeah, it's just all, it feels globally that we're still in this big ongoing period of just upheaval, and everyone's kind of sat on their hands a little bit. And like for the kinds of businesses we're trying to work with, they're all very big B2B kind of corporates, so they just don't tend to like, in those environments, they all just tend to be like, oh, well, we'll just sort of stop doing stuff and see what happens, because we've got enough money to just ride the storm basically, and see who's left alive in 2 or 3 years. Whereas obviously I, as a much smaller business, I'm not sat on hundreds of millions of dollars and cannot just sit here attempting to survive for the next like 5 years. So yeah, I'm in very much the same boat as you, really. But it's also partly why we're looking to sort of, I wouldn't say punch above our weight, but obviously we've got connections back to the UK, we've got connections in the US, in Denver, and in Singapore. So we're just looking to, I guess, expand our client base more globally to connect up all the people that we work with, and see if we can either build on our existing relationships and do more that way, or just sort of manage the concentration risk around certain markets from that perspective, which is obviously much easier said than done. But just call a couple of the old gang from the UK and be like, what's going on? That's why I'm talking to you, Lottie. We'll just see what we can do, get in there.
That's it. You got to, there's opportunities everywhere, aren't there? You just got to,
I think so.
You've got to dig around for them. And sometimes you've got to scratch, below the surface and go much deeper at certain times. Totally. And I think that's probably where we're going to be for the next 12 months or so. But I think those things are exciting because they do. Yeah. You're always going to get a few people that will go against the grain. Typically, yes, a slowdown. Everyone cuts training. Everyone cuts marketing. It's 80% maybe do that, but you will then have a pocket that will absolutely invest in that and go against the grain, because that's how huge brands have grown overnight. When you look back through past recessions that have done that. I think. It's just being open-minded, isn't it? And as you say, being kind of practical, looking at, what are the practical things that you can do and consider. I think for me, I was thinking recently that, obviously with new business, it's when people don't know you, it does take longer to kind of convince people of that. So, maybe there's more work to be done with, retention of our existing client base, talking more to our existing client base, seeing more of our existing client base, me physically going to people's offices, boots on the ground, there's not as much of that happens, I don't think, and hasn't post-COVID. And, as I alluded to last night, meeting a client in person, 9 years, that shouldn't really happen in a way. I should have seen him several times in person. So maybe that's a note to self to go, okay, let's go out. Let's do some trips. Let's go traveling and see some people in the person.
Do you know what though? I think I was talking to a few of my also fairly long in the tooth other agency, either ex-agency or still agency friends about this as well, because we obviously, when we were spending other people's money, used to spend as much time as possible entertaining people, because we could go to fancy restaurants and go drink expensive drinks and not have to pay for any of it ourselves, which was awesome.
Great.
But going from that to the COVID, the period we don't talk about now, where no one could go anywhere, to now, I still don't think we've got the balance exactly right again. And your example is a perfect one where I don't think it's necessarily bad that you haven't, met your client in person before now, because I think now, post-COVID, people are a bit more like, oh, well, unless we really need to meet, there's no need to actually go out and, do we need to? Could it have been an email? I think that mentality is still very much there. And breaking back through that to just be like, do you know what? It is fine just to meet for lunch and catch up or whatever, which I'm still a big fan of. But unfortunately, a lot of my client contacts are all over the show now, so it's becomes quite an expensive exercise to fly to, Singapore for lunch and back, which obviously is, a $2,000 lunch by the time you're done's not really worth it, unless you're there anyway. But I think there's definitely still a bit of that, people are just a bit just can't be asked, I'll just stay at home or stay at the office or just not bother, which is a bit of a shame, because that is where you build those relationships, right? And some of the people that I'm still in touch with now from going back 15 or 20 years or whatever, from those days of just being we'll go and do a quarterly review, but just do that as fast as possible so we can all just go out for dinner and hang out for an evening, was essentially how we retained some of our biggest clients at the agencies I've worked at before. I think there's room to bring that back, basically, is what I'm saying, without also just spending all of your profits on, going out and entertaining people, because then you'll be right back to needing to go win more business again, right?
This is it. It's all in the balance.
Yes, exactly. And I think on that poignant, let's go meet people now, Lottie, tell me how should people find out you guys? If people haven't heard of Shot Blast, how can they find your channels? Where are you? What should they be talking to you about? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, I think so much of it is with socials is a great one really for us. Like everything's on there. Everything that's worth sort of seeing. It's all the highlights, isn't it? It's all your shop window highlight reel. Obviously the website's great, but that's where you'd go for your deeper information. And I think that is interesting you say that, because that's the one thing that I think I've noticed a change of in the last few years. I have to do a pitch, to someone new. And I've actually found that in most of the pitches, I don't talk about what we do. I don't say anything about what we do at all. And there are never any questions on it. And I've realized it's because they know all of that already. They've looked at all of that in detail. They tell you videos that they've seen and watched, they reference it. And I was thinking, God, yeah, actually, they just go to your social channels, your website, wherever, YouTube, and look in detail. So then, that part is almost being removed, and you're talking more about the problem solving side, which arguably is the most important bit anyway, because no one's really interested in what you do. It's more about how you solve. It's how you solve the problem, right? It's how you fix whatever it is that they've got going on. So it was just sort of something to throw in there as an interesting observation. But yeah, I think if people want to get in touch, they just got to reach out on the socials. We're on there all the time. There's always new stuff going out. You can follow us on there and you find out as much or as little information as you want to know. And hopefully be a little bit entertained at the same time, because we try and keep our content really real and fun. And I've got this kind of, cheeky sort of personality. So I think that plays out in a lot of our content. We've been pranking each other a lot recently in the office, and I have an ongoing prank that I'm working on, which I can't reveal because otherwise they're all going to know
too much
about it.
Like everyone's hovering around you. Then
I got one team member last night, so yeah, that was good. Comedy gold. So stay tuned for that one. But
that sounds worth holding out for, like, already. Yeah. Are these getting into dangerous territory, or are these, I assume, work pranking? Right?
Yeah, I don't think I'll be getting, HR won't be getting involved. We should be safe.
I like it. Yeah. I'll include all of the links to all your various socials under this episode, like when we put it out. Is there anything else, just circling back around to where we started, like before we wrap up, what is there anything else that you, I guess, want to touch on the subject of, the importance of those key things you mentioned, like human connection, storytelling in film, the importance of, I guess, bringing a human face to brands potentially? Like, what is what are the key things people should be thinking about if they're thinking about actually using film as a medium for their business? Just keep that work focused.
Yeah, I think it's simplification. I think everything sometimes gets made to be a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And we are now in an era where, as you say, you've got everything at your fingertips. You've got AI, you've got everything that can help you, that can speed things up, that can give you ideas. It can make you think about different things. So I think you've just got to not overthink the process. It's just simplify it right down to what are you interested in, and what are you interested in really in talking about in relation to your field, and then working on a format that's going to allow that to come out in its most genuine way, and then just see what happens. But look at what happens. You can't just throw stuff at the wall and hope it sticks. I think you've got to you have to look at what's going on and assess and be prepared to pivot and change and flex, but keep it simple. It doesn't need to be difficult. It's not rocket science, is it? And I think the overcomplication of things slows down the decision making. It slows down getting started. It takes the vibe away, and you know, people overthink it, and then they're not themselves because they're coming across. You just got to like try and let all of that go and just imagine none of it's there, and just be yourself. Keep it real, and see what happens, and just keep plugging away at it. Slowly catch a monkey, right?
I like it. What a note to end on as well. That is a much more eloquent and succinct summary than I was going to do, like, so I appreciate it. I think that's awesome. Well, look, I don't know if you've listened before, Lottie, but I still don't have a good ending for the show. So thanks for coming on and joining and talking to me. It's been super interesting, and hopefully
thank you.
We'll have you back in future if you want to come back and recap
this is
some
it.
of this. Yeah.
Well, maybe I've just got to, in the interest of like personal connection, boots on the ground, maybe I just need to fly out to Australia and have a little.
You probably should.
Have a little trip.
We could do it in person, right? Yeah.
Right.
I need to buy
it's
some more microphones. Yeah. Well, look, there's more than one chair in this room, so there's an open station there. Just let me know. Let me know when you're down.
That's it. I'll get my flight booked.
I like it. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Lottie. Pleasure. This is the ending. That's the end of the show. So thanks, and talk again next time.